I've been looking forward to being together with you and excited for this time. Let me start off by saying it's been a good day so far. A good day? Great. So I look forward to this time. I've actually been anticipating this for a couple of weeks because it's such an important time to talk about our vision, where we are as a foundation, where we are as a community, and what we need to do going ahead. But before I do that, I want to start by just saying thank you. Thank you. You know, progress in CF is not something that happens by accident, right? It happens with intentionality. It happens with planning, but it also really is driven by passion and by devotion. If there's one thing that we have plenty of in this room, it's passion and devotion. So I want to say thank you for that. I want to say thank you to the people online. I know your passion and devotion, and truthfully, it's CF, people with CF and their families everywhere around the United States that is driving this. So whether you're leading walks, whether you're attending chapter meetings, whether you're telling your story, whether you're raising funds, you're really raising the expectations of what we can accomplish together as we push forward in CF. So during this time, I want us to accomplish two things together, pretty simple. The first one is to take a snapshot of where we are with CF and to say, okay, what are we seeing? What's the trends that we're seeing? Because I want to talk to you about our 5-year strategic plan and where we're headed, but we need to start by saying, where are we at? What are we seeing? So we make sure that that plan isn't just for today, but it sets us up for success in the future. The second part is I want to walk through this strategic plan, not in a boring way, I promise, I hope, but in a way that you really understand. During lunch today, we dove down, right? There were some things we really dove down into, but what I want to do is to give you this time a framework so that you can see everything that we do, whether it's on the science side, the care side, it's advocacy, community. You can see how it fits into the strategic plan that we have ahead. And really, this is not just our, the foundation's strategic plan. This is our strategic plan. And so my goal is at the very end that you feel like you own this. And that when you hear about those little details, that you can say, okay, this is where it fits in to the overall picture. So goal here is you own the plan at the end. We'll do Q&A as well to make sure that everybody gets this. So let's start with that overview, that snapshot of CF and where we're at. And CF has been amazing progress, but CF is changing, right? Cystic fibrosis is changing. You can feel it. Part of that's life with CF. I don't need to tell you, but life with CF is changing. The science of CF is changing. The things that we talk about, the problems that we need to solve, it's a different vocabulary, right? It's a whole different way of thinking about it. There's also an approach to care, the things that we think about with care and the things that we need to move forward there. And then even some of the community issues, right? Life is, with CF is changing. And what I'd say with CF is it's a really amazing mix. Progress, incredible progress, right? And progress that everybody else in medicine looks at and says, wow, how do you do this? At the same time, if you really know CF, you also know there's challenges. As a matter of fact, there's new challenges that we haven't faced before. So to get started, let's start with looking at some of that progress and some of the challenges, because that is the thing that has informed our strategic plan, and it gives you a vision for what we need to address to make sure that we're successful in the future. So let's start with those areas of progress for life with CF. And some of these things are reiterations of things we talked about early, but one of the things I want to make sure that you take home from this time are what I call pearls. Little pearls that you can put in your pocket, you can take home and you can break out to impress your family and friends, but mostly convince them about the progress we're making, but also the continued need that we have. So I'll point out some of those pearls along the way. So first of all, clearly longer lives with CF. Amazing story of progress, right? So we've said that right now, if you're born with CF, median predicted survival is now around 65 years of age. Incredible progress for that. Another one of this is the more and more adults with CF. So as of right now, about 62% of all people with cystic fibrosis are adults with CF. But a little pearl, the first pearl of this one I want to take you is an amazing one, that by 2028, 2/3 of all people with cystic fibrosis will be adults. So in the near future, 2/3. So put that one in your pocket, take it home with you. But I can remember when we celebrated getting over 50%, and now we're talking about 2/3. 2028 is right around the corner, right? 2028, 2/3 of people with CF will be adults. For many people on CFTR modulators, life with CF has changed. And so one of these has been fewer medications. We talked about the Simplify study. It's the first study we ever did where we said, let's not add medicines, let's take away medicines, right? So we're able to develop guidelines where we say, hey, if you have these things, you can potentially stop your pulmozyme. You can stop your hypertonic saline. This idea of simplifying fewer medications is certainly a trend. Fewer clinic visits. You saw this earlier, but if you go way back before modulators, people with CF averaged about 5 clinic visits per year. 5 per year. If you saw now, we're at about 3.7, and that's continuing to come down. So again, fewer clinic visits, fewer IV antibiotics and hospitalizations. So for the longest time, we kept the same number in mind when it came to IVs. 35% of people with cystic fibrosis did a course of IVs every year. You know what the number is now and has been for the last couple? 12%. 12% of people do a course of IV antibiotics every year. So a dramatic reduction in the frequency of IV antibiotics. And then fewer lung transplants. I decided to pull this out just because it was so startling. This is the number of lung transplants by year dating back to 2004. So before Trikafta basically peaked at about 250 lung transplants, and we've had the exact same number of lung transplants the last 2 years for people with CF, 61. The other thing that's amazing about that is only 40 of those were first-time transplants. 20 of those were people who needed a second transplant. So again, it just shows you how much life has changed with CF, that dramatic reduction. And the last thing I have to acknowledge is that you've been hearing about this already, and this is this idea of transformative treatment for CF starting at younger and younger ages with modulators. So whether it's Kalydeco, which is approved down to age 1 month, or Trikafta, which is approved down to age 2 years, or Liftrec, which is 6 and will continue to move down. And then we've even talked about now in utero treatment, right? Treatment before people with CF are born with modulators. We're seeing a different approach to treatment of preventing problems rather than just responding to problems. And many of those people who start early may never experience some of the things that we think are classic for CF, like CF lung disease, or even needing to take pancreatic enzymes. So this is life with CF. This is the progress part. But if you know CF, and everybody in this room does, you know there's areas of real challenge. So let's talk about that because it informs our plan. Of course, we know when we feature this over and over again, 10 to 20% of people with cystic fibrosis don't benefit from modulators, either because they have mutations which won't respond, or because they can't tolerate some of the side effects. One of the other pearls that just shows you the work that we need to do is when we looked at the registry, median survival for people who don't have modulators is about 2 decades shorter. So rather than that 65, it's in the lower 40s. That's unacceptable. As Doris Tolson said, that's unacceptable. And it shows the work that we have to continue to do. We know that even for people who are on modulators, there's continued challenges, right? So infection, I was going to give you another one, that infection continues to be an issue even with modulators. So for the longest time, we said that about 12% of people with CF have problems with non-tuberculous mycobacteria infection. So then Trikafta came, you know what the number is now? 12%. It's still the same. This is a challenge that we continue to see and absolutely have to overcome, because treatment of NTM is a bear for anybody who's gone through that, and we want to make sure that we continue to address that. We also know that as people live with CF longer, which is fantastic, we're celebrating, we're seeing new challenges, right? So one of the things you may not realize, but as we look forward, we know that every year you live with CF longer, that your risk of CF-related diabetes continues to increase. That pancreas sometimes continues to have some of that inflammation over time. So if you're an adult with CF right now, we predict that over 50% of current adults will likely end up with CF-related diabetes. And so we have to be thinking about how can we help that. Now, it may be a different story who people who start modulators earlier, but we know that this is going to be something we have to be planning for in the future. Now, that's all about life with CF, but the other part is just the ecosystem that has made this story so impressive. The bottom line, as Steve hinted at today, is that drug companies are less willing to take on CF. They look at it from the outside and they say, that work's done. Do we really need to do that much more? They don't understand, but many drug companies now just avoid CF because they think there's other areas. biotech investors are less willing to invest in CF because they think less upside. Whether it's a cure, a one-time cure, they don't think, okay, that's going to make all that much money, or a smaller group of patients who may benefit, they're thinking, I'm not going to get as much return as I thought. So we've, for ages, used this venture philanthropy where we leverage our investment. We put a little bit in, we draw in investment. That whole approach is requiring some tinkering. We're needing to do more to make sure that the world's best science comes into CF because of some of these trends. And then I don't need to talk to you about it because it's front and center for everybody at March on the Hill, but the life of, or navigating life with CF continues to be a challenge. So access to best care continues to be an obstacle. More and more adults with CF need to get their own insurance, and they're having to figure out, okay, how are we going to make this work with the rest of life and make sure I still get access to the best medicines and best care. And then obviously trends for less government funding for science and for healthcare, which are putting real stress on the care system and our research infrastructure. So these are challenges. These are new challenges that we have to modify our approach going forward. This is where the foundation absolutely steps in, and this is what we've talked about as we've prepared for our next 5 years. I hope you realize, and from this, it's clear we have work to do yet. As a matter of fact, our most challenging work is still ahead of us. Yes, we're going to get therapy for everyone with CF, no matter what mutations. We're going to end up addressing the challenges that people face. We're going to cure CF, but that work's still ahead of us. And the setting is different now than we've had before because rare disease research is hard. We've talked about some of the settings where people don't want to invest in this. We've talked about some of the other things around this, but we don't want to be at the mercy of what's going on around us. So we're not going to allow ourselves to be at the mercy of the market, other investors. The role of the CF Foundation and the role of partnering with you is to drive forward progress in research and in care, no matter what's going on around us, right? So that's part of this planning. And at the end of the day, we want to make sure that the best science and the best care is focused on cystic fibrosis. And so this is why we look forward to partnering with you, and we ask ourselves over and over again as we plan, how can we make sure we're preparing for that? That's where this 5-year strategic plan came in to make sure we get to those long-term goals. So as part of our 5-year strategic plan, we actually started about 1.5 years ago, even though we just announced it literally in the last 2 months or so. And part of this was asking ourselves some really hard questions. One of these was saying, what is absolutely essential for us to move forward on that research and that care component? So what's not what's just nice to have, or what's all the things we could do. It is what do we have to do to make sure we continue this amazing story and push that forward. And the other thing we asked ourselves as a foundation is, where do we need to lead? What are the things that only we can uniquely do, and how do we make sure we prepare ourselves for that? And then how do we use our resources? We're blessed with having an endowment, but we can only have to be thoughtful about how to use those resources. How do we make sure we put them right to the top priorities, and we both be aggressive at this moment to drive science, but also think in the long term to make sure that we can all be together when we celebrate getting to the finish line. And that's led to our strategic plan and this cure, care, and community, which I'm going to walk you through right now. It's also led to some of our approach and our strategy really on the financial and the organizational component to be able to support that. And what I want to do now is to walk through that framework. Again, the goal here is at the end is you get it. You own it. You understand it. Every time you hear this trial or that trial, you can think in your head, oh, it fits right in here in this framework. That's the goal. And if you want the real details on the strategic plan, go to cff.org. It's under About Us. You can dive down. But what we're going to do now is talk about that framework and then make sure you have some pearls along the way. So let's start with that first C, cure. Cure. Now, one of the things I'm going to say right up front is that cure is not just cure. When we say cure, we talk about the science of new therapies. All right, so when we say cure is the first C, yes, we're going to talk about those genetic technologies, but it means anything in science. That's an important first distinction as you talk about that first C. So let's talk about it. At the top of our list in our strategic plan is genetic technologies. You heard some of that today, but the reason it's so important is genetic technologies is the pathway to making sure that every person with CF, no matter what mutations they have, has transformative therapy. Right? So that's why genetic therapies is up at that, or genetic technologies is up at the top. And I'm going to make this simple for you. You've heard lots of different stories. You've heard splice sense. You've heard about ASO, or lots of different things. I'm not going to go through all those, but I'm going to give you 3 categories to think about in these genetic technologies where most things fit into. There's a couple of miscellaneous categories, but if you know these 3, you're good to go. And that is RNA, DNA, the other, and gene editing. So RNA, remember, is that messenger in the cells that tells the cells how to make the cystic fibrosis protein, the cystic fibrosis channel. And so one of the most proximal ways for treating everybody with CF is giving RNA to the cells that line the lung to make sure they can make cystic fibrosis protein and channel no matter what mutations are in those cells. You've heard about today, there's 3 different companies we're working with. We're working with Vertex, Recode, and Arcturus, again with this idea of inhaling and introducing RNA, which wouldn't matter what type of mutation you have. Here's the bottom line. There's some challenges to that. We were hoping this would be a chip shot might be a little strong, but we were hoping we could just go rushing in and hit a home run as a leadoff hitter. The lungs are really well designed to fight off foreign materials. So the overall take home on RNA is, yes, we are making some progress, but it's a little slower than we were hoping for because of some of those challenges. And that's why you heard Steve talking about dosing and continuing to work. So this is maybe going a little slower than we had hoped. The next one is DNA. So the code in each cell that we all have in our lungs that tells cells how to make cystic fibrosis protein, the cystic fibrosis channel, which is needed, is in that DNA code. So one of the other approaches is to provide a correct copy of the DNA to those cells. This is called gene therapy. When you hear gene therapy, it usually means providing an extra copy of DNA to those cells of the body so it knows how to make the channel. This is another one where we have trials that are going on, 4D Molecular Therapy is a company that we're working that does gene therapy. This is another one that we're maybe going slower than we'd initially hoped because, again, it's introducing foreign materials into the lungs to give them the correct copy of that code, that DNA code, but having to overcome some of the challenges with the lungs wanting to fight that off and getting it to the right cells. But those are areas of RNA and DNA that we're pushing forward on. The one that I want to talk to you about as well is gene editing. You heard Steve's excitement, and we talked about the baby KJ and the example of this, but obviously what we're really excited about is for cystic fibrosis. And gene editing is not introducing foreign DNA, but it's actually using some enzymes, using some tools to change the DNA of each person's with CFs, their own DNA, to correct that gene. So whatever mutations they have, to correct it or to put in the gene using their own code, if that makes sense. This is actually going a little faster, a little better than we anticipated, and is a real source of excitement. We talked earlier about we can cure cystic fibrosis in our lab with gene editing. We can do it routinely. Now it's talking about translating that into people. And one of the things I want to talk about that's just exciting that you heard is that we think that we're probably about 3 to 5 years from doing our first early clinical trial of gene editing with people in CF. This is actually a little faster than we really anticipated, yeah. The reason this is so exciting, all of these genetic technologies, is because, yes, we always think about that group that doesn't have modulators, but this science, particularly the gene editing, is the exact same science which is going to lead to the cure of cystic fibrosis for everyone. So as we talk about that gene editing, those early trials, which will probably be for a mutation that doesn't have modulators, maybe one of the stop mutations, and we'll focus on that to begin with, that's informing us, it's laying the groundwork and establishing the science that eventually is going to cure CF. Now, we always talk about genetic technologies, you've heard a bunch of that, but I also want you to think there's 2 things when we talk about cure. Genetic technologies, but also addressing the challenges that people with CF still face every day. And there's a bunch of them, right? We heard about it in all those questions. I could have gone through a bunch of questions today. And some of those include infection, Pseudomonas, NTM, diabetes we've talked about, GI and liver disease, mental wellness, lung transplantation. These are all challenges that we're still facing, which are addressed as we think about our plan going forward. But I can't go through all those details. We said we're going to keep this at a high level, but I'm going to give you some special pearls in those areas for addressing. And these are things which you're going to see in the years ahead. These are not a hope. I'm basing these on trials that are already going on or research that we're already doing. So I expect that we will see these in the years ahead. One of these is going to be the detection of infection using breath or urine tests. Right now, you have to cough into a cup, or if you can't cough into that, we swab your throat. We hope we get something. In the future, we're going to use breath, exhaled breath or urine to be able to detect infections. We're already testing this, and that'd be something you could take home to monitor to make sure about infections. You're going to see new approaches to treating Pseudomonas and NTM using the tools we have. Remember, we said it's not always about developing new drugs. That takes a long time. We have multiple trials right now which talks about using the current tools we have to do an even better job and making it more effective. You're going to see a new enzyme replacement therapy that only requires 1 pill per meal. We've talked about how GI symptoms and all that area of digestion continues to be a real challenge, but we're now into phase 2 trials with a newer enzyme which would likely only require 1 pill per meal. And wouldn't that be wonderful, not to have an entire pocket full of enzymes for school lunch. And see, another one is going to be diabetes care. And actually, Dara talked about this, but diabetes care that doesn't require any finger sticks or shots, that uses AI to be smart and basically acts as a bionic pancreas to be able to manage diabetes, especially as we talked about what the future may look like for adults with CF. We're going to see better understanding of adult CF liver disease. This is something we know that we need to lean into because it's changing. And so part of this is going to be some studies that start to really characterize and help us to understand and plan what do we need to do in CF liver disease. CF liver disease is important. Right now, if you look at the things that shorten people's lives, number 1, lungs. Complications for lung transplant. Number 3 is liver disease. So that's on the plan. And then another one you're absolutely going to see is treatment of CF in utero with CFTR modulators. I know you're going to see it because we're already seeing it. As a matter of fact, I don't know where Elizabeth is, but Elizabeth was one of the people who's here today, just shared with me that she just found out that she's carrying a child with CF, and she just got approved to start Trikafta to start treating her child to try to prevent. So not just a promissory note. This one I'm actually delivering early. I'm delivering that one today. So thank you. And then the last part I'll say in the cure in terms of this framework is even better CFTR modulators. This fits into continuing to address the challenges that people with CF still face every day. And the next generation of Trikafta and Aliftraq are on the way. So both Vertex and Sionna have combinations of drugs that are significantly better than Trikafta and Aliftraq are now in early trials. So just as you understand that Trikafta, Aliftraq turn on the cystic fibrosis channel to about 2/3 function. And we've seen the amazing difference it makes for people with CF. These new drugs turn it on fully, make it 100% function. So that's why we're excited. This would be the end game for modulators because it's going to be up to normal. But these are actually already in clinical trials and part of the key next 5 years that we're going to be thinking about in that cure. So with this framework, whatever trials, you're going to hear this trial, that trial, think about it fitting into this framework. This is what we're going. These are the priorities as we look ahead. That second C is care. And we know best care is absolutely essential, right? In order to be able to get the fullness of life that we want, the healthiest life possible, we have to continue to deliver on best care. And that's why we have an entire large team run by Dr. Farrow, Dr. Whitney Brown, that are focused on delivering best care. So as we look at our strategic plan, what are the areas that we're doing this? The first thing that's listed in the strategic plan is continually improving and innovating CF care delivery. Now, why do we need to do that? We've got a pretty good system. People look at it from all over the world and say, how do you do that? It's because CF is changing. You heard that, 2/3 adults by 2028. People maybe not wanting to come to clinic. So we need to think about how we're going to make sure that we have a network that delivers for where we're going, not just where we've been. So part of that is there's a team that's already meeting regularly to help design and to think what do we need to do for that future care network. Telehealth, a big part of where we're going. Adults with CF want to work. They want to be able to go to school. They don't want to be able to have to say, oh, I got to go to the clinic again. So we want to make sure that the structure's in place for telehealth and also the reimbursement. So that's why the advocacy for telehealth is so important. Access to specialists. We've heard this over and over and over again, where people say, oh, I've got this new challenge, but I can't find anybody that's really an expert on this. What you're going to see in these next couple of years, and actually maybe in the next year or two, is the opportunity not only to have those specialists help with one center, but specialists, whether it's in GI, mental health, whatever, that could support a geographic area rather than just a single center so that people can have access to the expert care that they need. And then lastly, continuing to train those specialists. You've heard about that, some of the program earlier, but we have specific programs in endocrinology, in GI, to make sure that we continue to attract the best doctors into cystic fibrosis and provide that best care. The other part of the strategic plan is continuing advances in personalized care, because we know that every person's CF journey is different. And then in order to get the best care, it has to be tailored for your circumstances. And so two things in particular I'd highlight in there. One of these is the treatment guidelines that say this is the best way to do that, and we continue to work on that. But the other is research, which allows us to say, what's the best for this particular problem? And so I want to bring this back up. This was a request I specifically made. And I thank Deriva and JP Clancy for all their work on it, the comms team. We're so familiar with the pipeline. We've looked at the pipeline for decades, right? Pipelines are new drugs. It doesn't tell the whole story. There is so much research going on that's not just about new drugs in each of these areas. So look at this and look at the area that you're particularly interested in, whether it's infection, digestive problems, reproductive health, mental health, CFRD. There are numerous trials being led by the CF Foundation, which we're going to change our approach. Not new drugs necessarily, but improving care. So click on those, take a look at that. This is an exciting time for moving knowledge forward to make sure that we address those challenges and then tailor it in the care system. The other last part of care is the best use of data. We've talked about AI, data. We have one of the best patient registries in the world. We want to make sure that we use that and continue to advance that. So whether it's with care, a lot of the pearls that I'm giving you come directly from the registry. We also want to make sure that it helps inform best care. On research, we want to be able to use this to be able to help design trials, to think about how to best use this, to support applications to the FDA as we move drugs forward. And then on the advocacy part, we want to make sure that insurance companies realize the impact of the medicines and the interventions that we're doing so we can get reimbursement for that, so people spend less time fighting with their insurance company on the phone. This is all part of the best use of data as we think about our strategic plan. There's also then that third C. So yes, cure and care are the bullseye. We know that that's essential, but community makes it all possible. It wraps all around, and so I'm going to talk about the three big things within community that we're focused on in the next 5 years. The first one is supporting daily life with CF. Life with CF is hard enough just from the CF part, right? We don't want to have all the other circumstances around get in the way or make life not as good as it could be. So one of the first things is continuing to support people navigating life with CF. Compass is up at the top of that list. We know that there's been thousands upon thousands of families who've used Compass to get the best insurance, to make sure they get access to medication, to solve any of these access to best care. We're going to continue to lean onto that. Nearly a third of all families with CF have interacted with Compass now. This is an important part of our work in the 5 years ahead, but also continuing to connect people with CF and to listen to you. So Sue Sullivan and the Community Partnerships team thinking about CF circles, this idea of getting together groups by specific areas of interest, whether it's a GI issue, whether it's pregnancy, the idea of having groups of particular interest. So maybe it's the thing that you're excited about or that you have questions about, to be able to do that. And then the community voice. We used to have just a panel of a handful of adults who would give us advice. Those days have changed. We now have thousands of people with CF and their families who are part of community voice, who can give us input into what's important to them, give us advice. And that's something we're going to continue to lean on in these next 5 years. And the other part, perfect for this time, is to deliver trusted, timely information. When you have a question about CF, when you say, what's really the truth? What do I need to be doing? You can be confident that you can come to the foundation, whether it's our website or our emails to you. Just be confident that here's the right answer. Here's the right answer. And part of this is we want to continue to tailor this so that it's not just a blast of information to you, Some of the new systems we're going to be using are going to tailor it so you can say, here's what I want to hear about. Maybe I don't need to get all 740 emails. I can just get 12 and focus on the ones that really are most important to me. Number 2 on this framework for community, continuing to advocate for what matters for people with CF. I don't need to talk about that because March on the Hill is a great example of that, but every aspect of CF benefits from advocacy, research, continuing to tell the story about NIH, continuing to advocate about the importance of the FDA as a partner to us in moving forward. On the care side, it's continuing to make sure that at the local level that we can make changes that benefit people with CF. Did you know that advocacy in the past year has changed the approach for newborn screening in 10 states to make better screening, to make sure that more people with cystic fibrosis are identified? So that's a direct result of advocacy from the foundation at the national level, but really locally, from local advocates telling the story to make sure that the best screening practices are followed. And then continued support for life with CF. Little things like the Co-Pays Act can make a big difference, right? We want to advocate for the small things too, that we know that can make such a difference in people's lives with CF. I have to particularly call out because I've been so impressed in terms of advocacy on the March on the Hill. So we had 200, a lot of times I'll come and I'll feel like the March on the Hill is a little smaller and then we have VLC. It felt like just one continuous, let's get after it, right? So we had 250 volunteers at March on the Hill. "45 states. Actually, anybody who was here for March on the Hill, I want to hear from you. Raise your hand. Actually, raise both hands. Yeah, look at that. Come on. It's awesome. So I see your picture here, but that's what we're going to do. We're going to continue to identify, work with you and partner, and make sure that our voice is heard for these key areas. It works. Advocacy works. I said that the first night. We've seen that with NIH funding, right, where we've actually been able to restore some of the fundings for some key infrastructure and some key care centers that is going to make a difference for people with CF. And then the last part of community and the last part of this plan, it's last, but it makes everything else possible. And that is to achieve bold fundraising goals. Achieve bold fundraising goals. This language is directly from the strategic plan when we say bold. And that's because nothing that we've talked about, whether it was at lunch today or the plan, it's not going to be possible if we don't continue together, be successful in boldly fundraising. Now, why do I say that? One of those little pearls you heard earlier, but again, get ready, put it in your pocket, keep it, is that we're going to spend $1.5 billion on cure and care alone in the next 5 years. $1.5 billion. The reason fundraising is so important is about 25% of our budget each year, annually, comes from fundraising. Our budget's around $450 million. It'll be in that $450 million range in the years ahead. 25% of that comes from fundraising. We are blessed with having an endowment that we can use our resources, and we are willing to spend that down. But in order to do it at the right level, in order to have the long-term staying power and to push forward, we need to continue to have that balance between using the endowment but also continuing to fundraise. That long-term financial model and all the things you've said is based on continuing to raise $100 million a year. So part of this, it's not only the fundraising, but for us, it's challenging ourselves to also have discipline and focus to best use our resources. We've challenged ourselves as an organization to say, how can we be as efficient and as effective as possible so that we make sure we're squeezing every resource we have to push forward to people with for cystic fibrosis in the best possible way. And to do that, we thought about strategy. You're seeing some of that now. We thought about structure, making sure that our teams are efficient. And part of that's also staffing as we think about what do we need for the future. So you've been seeing some of those changes. You've seen some of those at the local level. We've done it at the national level. I can promise you this is all done with deep thought to try to set ourselves up to bring this story home, to be most effective, and to really to deliver on all the things we've promised, both in the strategic plan, but in that end game of curing cystic fibrosis. Part of this, again, is obviously the fundraising team for the future, getting that right. We're going to continue to work together with you locally and say, okay, how are we going to get this right? But we don't view our fundraising team as just us at the foundation. This is our fundraising team, right? We're in this together. So everybody in this room is part of our fundraising team. I just say thank you for your partnership on this. Now you know why it's so important. Happy to answer other questions if we need to on that. I would just say thank you. Thank you for making this possible. I will say that we exceeded $100 million. We're almost $105 million this past year because of all the efforts of people like you and those online. So this is my last slide where we talk about sort of the future vision, and my hope is during this time you've started to get a glimpse of, okay, where are we going? What are some of those trends? How are we going to do that? But I really want to say that when I think about the future, I start by just saying we have a privilege. The privilege of participating in one of the most remarkable stories in medical history, and I mean that. And the idea of not just transforming a disease, but defeating a disease, actually defeating a genetic illness. And it's not just the progress part, it's the speed at which we're doing this. I've had a chance to tell this to a number of people in the room, but my mentor is a physician named Dr. Beryl Rosenstein. He's a pediatrician at Johns Hopkins. Oh, that's right, Beryl, that's right, good. Beryl worked directly with Dorothy Anderson, the woman who first identified and discovered cystic fibrosis in 1938. So in the careers of 3 people, actually not even the full careers yet, of 3 people, we've gone from identifying cystic fibrosis and a lethal disease which shortened life below the age of 5 to now talking about life expectancy beyond 65 and talking seriously about doing a clinical trial which will establish the science to eventually cure this disease. So an incredible pace. So we are together going to finish this story off, and we're going to make sure that every person with CF, no matter what mutations they have, has transformative therapy. We're going to continue to address the challenges that people with CF have today, and we're going to finish this story off. And how are we going to know when we're done? Here's how we're going to know. We're going to say, hey, the testing's done. The time is here. Call your clinic, not just to make a clinic appointment. Call to schedule your appointment that's going to cure your cystic fibrosis. I hope that as we talk about this framework, as we talk about this plan for the next 5 years, you can see that this call is not just something we're hoping for, it's something we're planning for. So thank you for your partnership. I know we can do this together. Let's keep going.